Okay, so yesterday we started by looking at scheduling projects, what we refer to as project schedule management. And part of what we said regarding project schedule management, we said that the summary is that to be able to schedule a project or manage a schedule for any project, we said that first and foremost, we must know what are those activities that we need to do. Then the second thing is that those activities will then now sequence them, put them in the logical order in which we need to perform those activities. Why the third thing that we need to do is to now come to a conclusion of when to actually perform those activities. And we said that that is the summary of what it entails when we discuss project scheduling management. It is technically impossible to schedule a project, or in some cases what they refer to as creating timeline for a project, when you don't actually know what you need to do. And there is no way you can schedule a project when you don't talk about the scoping. And that is why we discover that there is no way we can succeed in scheduling our project without talking about scoping. And the aspect of scoping that becomes necessary to this is what we refer to as what? WBS. And we said that WBS is simply the word work breakdown structure. So therefore, we now went further to say that the work breakdown structure is now the basis of being able to easily schedule or carry out scheduling in our project. Okay, so now the situation of things is that if we now need to schedule our project, then it is important that the first thing that should be done is to define the activities. Just like I said, all the activities, or we can refer to activities as tasks. So to define an activity, we need to now go back to the scope of work and pick our work package and break out the task that needs to be performed to complete a work package. So that process of trying to break out or itemize all the work that needs to, the task that needs to be carried out to perform a work package, then we refer to it as what? Define an activities. All right. So when those activities have been defined, the next thing that will be done is to what? Sequence those activities. And when we say sequencing, we are saying that it is technically impossible that we put our activities in such a way that they do not follow a logical order. So for we to be able to perform task A, and we know that it is task A that we should perform first, before we perform task B, then there is need to put that work in the sequence in which the task should be performed. So sequencing is when we now decide to put those activities or tasks that have been defined and put them in the order in which we want them to be performed. Okay, and we also, those are the things we discussed. Then we also went further to now decide that the next process after that has been done is to be able to create what we refer to as activity duration. Activity duration in this context is what is the amount of time that each of those activities that have been sequenced should be performed. How can we tell that activity A task will need to take 1 day to be completed? How can we tell that activity C task will need to take 4 days to be completed? And that is what we refer to as estimate activity duration. All right, so that is very important as we move on in this class. So the next thing that we want to look at is develop schedule. So the three things we have discussed put together is now what we refer to as the schedule. So if I succeeded in defining activities separate and I succeeded in being able to sequence the activity, the moment I'm able to add the amount of time each of those activities will take to be completed, then we have succeeded in defining or developing our schedule. So at this stage of the project, when we are developing schedule, it now gets to that point where we have said that yes, this document become a baseline for measuring the schedule for the project. So it becomes a baseline for measuring what? The schedule for the project. Okay? So now, if that becomes a baseline, what are the tools and techniques that we need to follow through? So those are what we want to look at next. So you can see that the output of developed schedule, you can see um, schedule baseline. So schedule baseline automatically becomes the approved schedule for the project. So which means we can't add more or remove until there is a change request. Okay, so that is what schedule baseline. So the next thing we want to look at is the critical path method, because this is very important in every scheduling of a project. What is the critical path method? The critical path method is that aspect of the project that simply explains to us that there is a network diagram, and in that network diagram, the path with the longest duration is referred to as the critical path, and it is also the path that contains the shortest time the project can be completed. Now, in a schedule, when we say a critical path, we are simply saying that there are some set of activities that you have defined in your project that you cannot tolerate any lack or delay. Exactly, there are some activities that if at all there will be any play or jumping around, going on vacation for, but there are some critical activities that cannot be delayed in your project. Those critical activities is why we refer to them as critical path. All right. So now that is what we want to look at next. We'll come back to this definition again. What is a critical path? Now let's look at this network diagram. All right. This is a network diagram. Hello, are we together? BC, are you with me, please? Hello, BC, are you there? Can you hear me? Hello, BC, can you hear me? All right. So this, yes, I can hear you. All right. So this is a critical path scenario we want to calculate now, and this is a network diagram. All right. So in this network diagram, you can see the duration. Like activity A, it has been stated that activity A will be completed within 3 days. Activity B will be completed within 8 days. Activity E will be completed within what? 6 days. Now, what is the critical path? Now, in this network diagram, before we can calculate the critical path, the first thing that will be done is to actually find out how many paths do we have in this network diagram. That is number one. Then number two, the duration of the path. Duration of each path. Yes, quickly. Anyone? Joe, how many paths can you see, can you identify in the network diagram? Good evening. Okay. Okay. Yes, I can hear you. You can see about three or four. All right. Okay. All right. So let's. Yes. On. Yes. Yes. Okay. Don't. No, no. Okay. What we will do is that I have a video for it. All right. You understand? So by Monday I will share that video. You can just move towards the end part to view it. What we'll discuss towards that. Yeah. Okay. So by Monday I will be able to share it. Okay. All right. So let's do this together. In this network diagram, you can see that this arrow is showing us the different relationship. So the parts we can have in this network diagram, you can see number one, let's say we start the project, we have the, we have A, the arrow from A to D, from D to E, from E to G, from G to H. That is the first part. Okay, so that is to say the first part. All right, so let's now look at the duration of that first part. 3 plus 8, 3 plus 8 plus 6 plus 4 plus 8. So that is the first part. 3, that is A, D, E, G, and H. Finish. That is the first part. Okay, and if we do the summation of that part will be 3 plus 8, that is 11. 11 plus 6, that is 17. 17 plus 12, that is about 29. Okay, then look at the second part. All right, we start the project. Okay, are you seeing it? We go to A, which is 3. Then from A we move to C, which is 6. From C we go to E. You can see the arrow from C pointing to E, which is another 6. From E the arrow point to G, which is 4. From G the arrow point to H, which is 8. And that gives us the total duration of 9 plus 6, that is 15. 15 plus 4, that is 19. 19 plus 8, okay, 19 plus 8, that is 27. Okay, So that is 27. Okay, so we move to the other part from start to A, from A to C, from C to F, F to G, and G to H. And that gives us a duration of 9 plus 9, 18. No, this one is 8. All right, 9 plus 9, 3 plus 6, 9. 9 plus 9, 18. 18 plus 4. Hello, BC. You say you can't hear anything. Hello, BC. Yes, hold sorry. It's one of the BC complained that she's not hearing. She dropped a chat that she's not hearing. So I dropped a message for her to log out and relog in. Yes. Okay. So as I was saying, the third part is we start from start to A, then from A to C, from C to F, from F to G, from G to H. All right, and the duration will be 3 plus 6 from 6, that is 9. 9 plus 6, and 9 plus 9, 9 plus 9, that is 18. 18 plus 4, that is 20, 22. 22 plus 8, that is about 30. Okay, all right, so let's look at the next one, and the next one now will be start to B. Okay, then from B to C, from C to E, from E to G, from G to H. All right, so that is the duration will now be 5 plus 6, which is 11, plus another 6, that is 17. 17 plus 4, that is 21. 21 plus 9 and plus 8, that is what? 29. Okay, so let's also see if there's another part. We start again from B, so B to C, C to F, F to G, and G to H. Okay, and if you look at that duration, we have about 3 5 plus 6, that is 11. 11 plus 9, that is 20, and plus 4, that is 24. All right, plus 8, that is what? 32. All right, BC, can you hear me now? Hello, BC, can you hear me now? Okay. All right, so that is 30. So if you look at it, there is no other part again in the network diagram. All right, so there's no other part again in the network diagram. So now the question now is how many parts do we have in the network diagram? So from the network diagram, you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. And in this part, what are their duration? You can see their different duration. Now, with this calculation, if you go back to that definition of the critical path, we said that the critical path is the path with the longest duration in the network diagram. So you go back to that network diagram. Which part has the longest duration? So you can see the parts that have the longest duration is automatically this part. So which means that becomes the critical path. So what are the items on that part? B, C, F, G, H. So what does that simply mean? It simply means that, so this is how to identify the critical path. So you can see that you can now know that the path with the longest and the highest duration automatically becomes the critical path. All right. So now with this formula or with this method, it simply now shows to us that the task B, which means if the project manager will be playing with his team at all, if he will have opportunity of not shouting or anything, task A must not, they can play about task A, they can play about task D, or they can even go on vacation. It doesn't matter. Whatever they like to do, they can play around, they can delay. Task C and task E, they can do anything they like. But you can see all these tasks B, C, F, G, H, because they are on the critical part. It simply means that all these activities or tasks to be performed, the project manager cannot delay at all. So which means this task B that we have agreed to be 5 days, it must be done in 5 days time. But this task A, even if they use 10 days, it's not his problem. It doesn't concern him more. Why? Because all these activities are not on the critical part. But this task B, that he said it must be done in 5 days, it must be done in 5 days. The project manager must do all he has to do to make sure this is done in 5 days. Task C also, the project manager must do all he needs to do to make sure this task C is done in 6 days. Task F, the project manager must do all he needs to do to make sure this task F is done in 9 days. So which means till task H. So which means that the project manager will tolerate zero level of error. He cannot permit any form of error on these activities. Why? Because they are on the critical path. But you know this activity A, D, and E, well, they can delay, they can play, they can give 1001 excuse. The project manager will not worry. But this task B, C, F, G, H, because they are on the critical part, it simply shows that the project manager cannot tolerate any level of delay. So all the tasks that are on the critical part, the project manager cannot tolerate, take note of that statement, any level of delay. That is what we refer to as what? The critical part. Now, there's another word again that I will also need to explain, which is very important to this class. There's also what we refer to as the near critical part. Excuse me, sir, what is the near critical part? The near critical part is any part that is close in duration to the critical part. So if you look at these 5 different parts we have identified, the near critical part automatically becomes this part that have, it becomes this part that have green. So the near critical part is this part that have green. Why is it near? Because it's the one closest in duration to the critical part. So what happened as a project manager? What is the caution you need to take as regard the near critical part? This simply shows that to you as the project manager, you must be one. The closer the near critical part to the critical part, the more risk your project is exposed to. So what are you supposed to do? You are to keep watching the near critical part. So which means all the activities you have in the near critical part, you must pay close attention to those activities. Hello, you must do what? Pay close attention to those activities. Excuse me, sir. Why do we need to pay close attention to those activities? Because if you are not paying attention to it, anything can happen that can make those activities in the near critical part to become a critical part. Because you are not paying attention to it and you are concentrating more on these items that are on the critical part, and you lose track of those items that you are supposed to look out for, which is the near critical part, it can bring a delay to the entire project. And that is why we define the critical part as the part with the longest duration in the project diagram network, and also the shortest time the project can be complete. So what this means is that 32 days is the shortest time the project can be completed. But if you add all the duration together, it is simply more than 32. So with all the duration you have together, you have about 49 days. So the total time for completing the project will be 49 days. But the shortest time to complete the project will be what? 32 days. So the remaining about 17 days left, the project manager can be playing, the team members can be playing, but that 32 days remaining is a must for them to perform. Is a must. So those items on the near critical part must be performed. All right, that is why they are where in the near critical part. It's very, very important. All right, I hope that is clear, Joseph. All right, now let's move on. What then happened, sir, if for instance peradventure some things happen beyond the control of the project manager, and somehow the items on the critical parts were compromised? Oh, that person that was supposed to carry out that task that was supposed to carry out this task on the critical part, maybe the person was now sick or something bad happened and it has to bring about a delay to the project. What then will not happen? What can still be done by the project manager to still ensure that it can still meet up with the deadline of the project? That is what we want to talk about, which refers to as schedule compression. Take note, schedule compression automatically becomes a technique or a strategy used by the project manager even when all chips are down, even when he discovered that yes, all these items on the critical part, what can I do? How can I go about it? And how can I still meet up with the project activities? How can I ensure that I did not delay the project sponsor or my reputation? How do I still keep on with my reputation? Then what would the project manager do is what? Schedule compression. So schedule compression is what? A strategy or a technique used by project manager to still be able to meet up even when the items on the critical part are delayed. So what are the different schedule compression methods that the project manager can use? There's what we refer to as crashing. There's also what we refer to as fast tracking. There's also what we refer to as reduced scope and cut quality. All right. So what is crashing? Crashing in a simple way is, for example, you already have a scheduled process. All right. So crashing is that technique. Let's assume you already have a process, not a, you already have a task whereby you have already defined the process by saying that this task will be completed by one team member and that task will take 5 days. Let's say, for instance, you have this task F, all right, and the person you have assigned this task F to carry out, because it's on the critical part and it is going to take 9 days, and maybe it's one person. Crashing is not saying that instead of me to allow one person to do this task and wait for 9 days, let me bring 5 people to come and do this task so that it can be done in 2 days. So you see that how many days have we saved from this now? We have saved extra 7 days. That is what schedule compression using crashing. So what one person should have been doing that would take 9 days, you brought 5 people to do it so that they can do it in 2 days. What have you done? You have done crashing. All right. So crashing is that schedule method that is carried out to bring more resources. Take note, the technique of crashing is that it brings about additional resources to complete the task faster. It brings what? About additional resources to complete a task faster. So instead of that task to be done by one person in 9 days, so the task then will now be done by how many people? 5 persons in just 2 days. What is the implication of crashing? To you as a project manager, crashing will always increase your cost because you are going to pay for those additional set of resources you are bringing on board to help you do the crashing. All right. Let's say it may not be human resources example. Let's say, for instance, this task F now, you have assigned this task to make use of one bulldozer. And for the bulldozer to complete this task is going to take 9 days, for example. You now say that, if one bulldozer, it will take 9 days for this bulldozer to complete this task. Okay, let me go and rent extra 4 5 bulldozer so that they can complete this task in just 2 days or one day. That is what crashing. So it can be in terms of resources, it can even be in terms of what? Equipment. Okay, so that is exactly what crashing is. Then fast tracking. Fast tracking is that technique that explains that instead of the tasks that you have arranged to be done sequentially, you now say that, okay, this task B and task B should be done before task C, F, G, H. You now say that instead of all these things to be done sequentially, you now decided, okay, so that instead of all these tasks to be done sequentially, so fast tracking is now that instead of all these tasks to be done sequentially, you now do them in parallel. So instead of you to wait until for task B to be completed before you start task C, you start both of them in parallel. All right, it's okay. Let task B start. Let task A start. Let task C start. Let everything just be going on in parallel. So when we say fast tracking is that technique whereby you begin to do the task that you originally planned to be done serially to now be done in parallel. Okay, instead of you to say let A start first and complete before B start, you now say, no, we are behind time. Let A and B start first. Let them just be doing their work. Let everybody just start. That is what fast tracking. All right? Are we together, please? All right? All right. So that is what fast tracking. Take note. The challenge with fast tracking is that it can bring the risk of more or rework. It can expose the work or the project to a rework because the team members can lose track of what is done. Okay? It can bring about rework. And that is the major risk associated with what? Fast tracking. Then the other schedule compression method is reduce scope and cut quality. Now, these two options are referred to as last resort, but they are often not considered in projects. Why? Because it will bring about customer dissatisfaction. So reduce scope in this context is now say, because we are behind time. Instead of uh, because we are behind time. Now all these activities here that we need to do, let's remove A, D, and F. Let's not do it again. Let's just focus on B, C. The customer will not be happy if you remove some tasks. The customer will not be happy if you cut the scope of work that needs to be done. He will not get full requirement. And because the customer will not get full requirement, the customer will not be happy. That is why reducing scope is even more like a last option to be considered. And that must be discussed with the customer. All right. So reducing scope is technically is not an advisable option to use when you want to schedule compression. All right. So, but take note of that. What is the effect of reducing scope? It brings about dissatisfaction to the customer. No customer will be happy that as originally planned, he has made money available, that when you will finish the building by Monday. By that time it should be painted, everything should be fine, the tiling should be ready. Then by Monday you are not telling him that, sorry sir, we can't do painting again, we can't do tiling again, we have closed, we can't work on and you are handing the project over to the customer without painting and tiling. There is no way the customer will be happy. Why? Because you have reduced the scope of work that needs to be done. That is what? Reduce scope. Then the other one, which is cut quality, which is almost the same thing as what? Reduce scope. You cut the quality of work that needs to be done. You just do it shabbishly. Then, just because you want to meet up with time, all right, that becomes an adverse effect to customer satisfaction. All right. So all these four are the schedule compression techniques. All right. So take note, the project schedule will now be created. All right. Now take note, there is what we refer to as a Gantt chart. There's what we refer to as a milestone chart. There's what we refer to as what? The network diagram. Now take note, the Gantt chart, if for instance you are using a software, all right, you can have a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart is more used to communicate with the project team members. So the project team members will understand the Gantt chart because the Gantt chart, it shows all the tasks that needs to be done and their possible timelines. The Gantt chart shows all the tasks that needs to be done and their possible timelines. That is the Gantt chart. The milestone chart. The milestone chart is what is used to report to management. All right. So if for instance you want to report to management, management want to see the progress of what have been achieved in the project. They want to see the milestone. They want to see those significant events that has occurred in the project that you have achieved. So take note, the Gantt chart is used to communicate to the project managers and his team, while the milestone chart is used to communicate or report to the management. All right? And the network diagram which we have, it shows the logical sequence of what has been created. It shows the logical relationship among the project tasks. Okay? So this for instance is what? A network diagram. All right. So this for instance is what? A network diagram. All right, do you get that, please? Okay, so that is that about a network diagram. All right, so the last part we will consider is control schedule. What do we mean by controlling schedule? Now we have planned the schedule. When we now need to control, it is now checking the planned schedule as against the actual schedule for the project. If, for instance, we have planned that task A will be done in 3 days, control schedule is that aspect where the project manager check the actual time or the actual duration project and task A was completed and compare it with the planned time it ought to be completed. So control schedule is when the project manager is monitoring the status of the project, is monitoring the progress of the project, and is making changes as a result of all the discovery or deviation or variances that he has observed in the project. For example, if it has happened that we planned that 3 days, we planned that if we start the project, task B should take 5 days. And when we started, you now discover that task B actually takes 6 days, which means there is a variance. So control schedule will now be that the project manager is monitoring task B and actually come to a conclusion that, oh, this task B is supposed to be done in 5 days. Why is it now being done in 6 days? You will now need to find out and make a discovery. And now either in that discovery process, it can either carry out a corrective action or a preventive action. That I don't want this situation whereby we have planned that task B should be done in 5 days and it's now done in 6 days. So in the next task, I don't want that situation to occur. If we have planned that the task should be done in 3 days, it should be done in that days. Or what could be the reason for those variants? The project manager will now ask questions to now find out what could be the cause of the problem as regard not completing the schedule as planned. Okay, so that is what control schedule is all about. This is actually done by the project manager. He monitors all the activities that have been defined and agreed upon in the network diagram, and he watches everything to ensure that all the planned schedule or task or timing is followed through as planned. In scheduling, what do we want to achieve? You can see we will get that information, which is work performance information, by the time we are doing that comparison. So by the time we are doing that comparison, definitely we are going to get the work performance information, and that can give us the opportunity to do a schedule forecast. And we are now seeing the progress of our schedule. We can now say, well, with how it is going, we can actually meet up in the next 3 days. We can complete the project in the next 4 days. So that becomes what? A schedule forecast. All right. You can see a change request. The project manager can issue a change request and say, well, I don't like the way we are delaying this project. All right, let's adjust and make changes to all the necessary schedule. That becomes very, very important as we relate to schedule. Is that okay, please? Hello, Joe. Is that okay? All right. So, any question for me? This is all we need to talk about project schedule. All right. Okay. All right. So, on Monday, you have the recording of this also. Okay.